Hi, this is Christian Buckley, and this is the session, The Role of Reporting and Governance. This is part of an ongoing series around different governance topics being done for the European SharePoint Conference community. So my name is Christian Buckley. I'll get to a few slides about myself and my company, but what we're going to cover in this session, and for those who have seen some of the previous sessions, are looking at these online, there is a little bit of repeat of some of the information, some of the general information around governance and what we're trying to do with this series. But what's unique about this one, I'm specifically going to go through and talk about the importance of reporting for your overall governance strategy. And basically, there's 5 areas that you should be focusing on, that you should have built in your strategy, and where you want to capture and track data. Talk about what's out of the box in both 2007 and 2010. I think we're still a little bit early on 2013. And of course, Office 365 has a lot of the same reporting capabilities that are in SharePoint 2010, because it's just based off of the foundation platform. And then some of the best practices. And again, there you're going to see some duplication in my previous webinars, but hopefully you'll get some value out of this. It should be through this webinar in about 25, 30 minutes. A little bit about me. So I'm the Director of Product Evangelism with Exceller. I've been a SharePoint MVP throughout this year, 2012. Prior to Exceller, I was with Microsoft for about 3.5 years. I started there as part of Microsoft Managed Services, which is the team that was chartered with creating a hosted version of SharePoint. It's now part of the Office 365 organization. Prior to Microsoft, I was a consultant for a number of years. I was part of a number of startups, some venture capital-backed startups. I've been working with collaboration technology since the late 90s and a number of different social tools. But was introduced into the SharePoint world back in late 2004. Did my first deployment for a customer in 2005, where I deployed WXS 2.0 and Project Server. So if you have any experience with either of those, then you know how much fun that I had. Let's see a little bit about, oh, yes, and I also co-authored a book, which is out there. I only ask that all of you buy a dozen copies. They make a great stocking stuffer for the holiday season. But what's great about this book is we wrote a book that's for end users and power users, that we're looking at how can I be more productive inside of SharePoint. Instead of instructing you on theory and details around specific features, we walk you through the building of 10 entire solutions. So the idea is that you start at the beginning of the chapter, the end of the chapter, you have a working solution in SharePoint. And a little bit about my company. Exceller's been around since 1994, the SharePoint space since late 2007. We are one of the leaders in administration and governance, and as well as migration, whether from SharePoint to SharePoint or from file shares into SharePoint. All right, a few definitions just to get us started here. Because there's all this talk on what governance is out there, and most folks that talk about governance really approach it from a solution standpoint. You know, governance is, and then they fill in the gap, the description, to position themselves against a tool or a service that they're selling. What is governance really? Because governance is something that I've had years and years of experience with. My background over 20 years now has been in the technical project management business analyst side of the business. So I've built and run project management organizations at a number of large companies as well as startups. And having a governance strategy in place is about taking action. It's about understanding what's happening in the environment, organizing and optimizing and managing based on business goals that you have in place. So a governance strategy is not a static thing. You don't go build it once, have a little website with a document up there, and then you're done. It's a living, breathing process. It's something that you need to continually look at and adjust as you learn about what's happening within the business. And so your process, your strategy for governance needs to be adaptable, because the needs of your business may change depending on what's happening with competition, depending on what's happening with usage of your tools, of your systems. You need to adjust and be constantly reviewing and auditing how your system is performing and how your end users are using the system. All right, why are we talking about governance? Kind of all those things that I just talked about, but specifically with SharePoint. Out of the box, it's very powerful. But most organizations, they just don't spend enough time thinking about management and governance of SharePoint until it's too late. And what we've seen with the maturity of SharePoint as a platform is that organizations are jumping on the governance bandwagon earlier, sooner, quicker, because they've experienced the pain of deploying a platform, and SharePoint fits in well with this description. They deployed a platform thinking, don't have time, don't have the people to go think about the rest of this. We'll figure it out as we go. So suddenly they find that they have all of these sites, just hundreds or thousands of sites in the system, and they're not sure what's out there, how they're being used. You have content all over the place. It's unfettered content, not being managed well. It's not tagged. There's not consistent taxonomy, and there's a lack of process in general. Some teams are good at process. Some teams have just inherently, they're well governed. They're making sure that what they're doing in the platform matches what the business needs are, but most don't. They use SharePoint in a very ad hoc collaboration way, and so the business is recognizing that, we're just not getting value. As folks in IT or the teams that are generating a lot of value out of SharePoint go to get additional funding or try to have their platform expanded, the executive teams are pushing back saying, show me the value. How are you, what is the return on investment that we've already given you, much less give you additional funds? So it's important to have a solid governance strategy, not just so that it's not about putting up barriers to how people work, but it's doing it in an organized way so that you can show the value back to the business. So why we're talking about reporting. So central to your planning is understanding and then managing what is happening inside your environment. So that could be identifying, assessing, and prioritizing the various activities, of course measuring and monitoring, so knowing what's going on, reviewing and modifying your strategy based on that changing data, and then creating policies that secure and protect. I mean, all of this is based on the data that you're seeing out of the system. You can't do it blindly. You cannot just look at quote-unquote best practices from other organizations without taking into account what's actually happening inside your environment. So, and this is just this generic, governance strategy. What's in your governance strategy? Your organization may be good at some of the things you see within this wheel. Others that you may need to go in and reinforce. It's great to go in as you're doing your initial assessment and building out your strategy to identify and be honest about where you're lacking, where you are poorly governing your systems, where you have loose ties or do not have ties between what is happening within your systems and what your overall corporate governance strategies are. How are we going to do more business, do that business faster, have happier customers, make more profit, all of the things that drive your corporate governance strategies, how are those things reflected down inside of SharePoint? So understanding what those driving factors are will be important as you lay out your reporting strategy. So some of those reporting strategies. So the reporting, yes, it's a broad topic, and so there are a number of different requirements based on how you have your system deployed, depending on how distributed the management is across your SharePoint environment. In a very simple view of SharePoint, you might have a farm administrator who may be responsible for more of this reporting. But in large enterprises, it may be broadly distributed. So you might have site admins, site collection admins, farm admins. You might have taxonomy or metadata administrators or librarians that are responsible for aspects of that. You may need to provide management dashboards or for the marketing team or specific data dashboards for IT to look at performance indicators of the system. All of those things, you need to look at what's important for your environment and how broadly it needs to be scaled, what roles are involved. But by having that timely and accurate data, it's going to help at each of those levels, those administrators, those business owners, to make the right decisions about what's happening on the platform. So you have this example here. So going in and auditing permissions, for example. You might go in and look at site and content activity and monitor the content database size and performance to get a true sense of what's happening in the system. But what you're doing with out-of-the-box tools could be very limited. So the problem is that you need data that's provided in a real-time basis and maybe at a more granular level that what can be provided out of the box in SharePoint. So you need to understand, again, what are we trying to accomplish, what's the data that we need, and then go in and look at what SharePoint can provide and where third-party solutions and tools may be able to augment. There's a lot that's out there that you don't have to pay for that's just freely available out within the community, but there are some things that you may want to provide, and I've got a couple of examples at the end, through third-party vendors as well. So just understand what's out there. So the different reporting areas that you want to look at, permissions, usage and activity, storage, auditing, and performance. These are the 5 primary areas of reporting that SharePoint out of the box provides some capability and that you may look at augmenting. So around permissions, things like troubleshooting why users cannot see the content that they should. I mean, permissions is always that number one issue. When end users come to you and say, I'm trying to do something, I'm unable to do it, it's getting unexpected behavior, the number one reason why is because of permissions. So having the quick ability to go in and see what's happening inside of permissions, reporting on the different types of compliance, auditing who has access to sensitive data, all of those things are critical in your permissions reporting. Your usage and activity analytics, what content is being used, what sites are being used, being able to plan for the future growth based on that usage. So doing some level of, and this gets down into storage as well, but understanding the level, the degree of to which the environment's being used is going to help you better plan out your capacity planning. So especially if you're getting ready to look at upgrading your platform, maybe you've just moved to 2010 or you're considering moving to 2013, by looking at and seeing where in your organization you're seeing the most activity might help you prioritize which teams move first, where you may need to dramatically scale out to support the growth that's happening in some business units. So again, don't go in blind. Understand what's happening in your usage activity, your storage, and then your auditing capability. Just what are the guidelines or the rules that maybe by your industry are guiding how often you're in looking at what's happening inside your environment and providing the accurate reporting for those people that need to provide these audits. And then the final one is looking at performance, especially if you have a geographically dispersed team, if you have multiple farms, being able to go in and monitor what's happening in the environment and be able to fine-tune based on that activity will be critical to your end user happiness at the end of the day. Because if your end users are not happy within the platform because it's slow, it's non-responsive, they're not able to quickly find the data that they need from their queries, then that is going to impact their overall view of SharePoint. So it's important to stay on top of what's happening from a performance standpoint. So those are the categories that we're going to look at here very quickly. So I don't have a lot of screenshots here. This is more of just kind of a snapshot of what you can do, what you can't do out of the box, and some guidance on things that you should look at. But hopefully it'll be able to help you as you're planning out your governance strategy. So around permissions reporting specifically, so permissions reporting is critical to your business. Of course, I mentioned from an auditing standpoint, just knowing who is doing what out on your environment, maintaining your accurate user access records. It's important from a licensing standpoint to know how many people are using the platform. And then also as you're troubleshooting functionality problems, again, number one reason why people experience problems is they've got the wrong level of permissions for what they're trying to accomplish. Missing from SharePoint is the ability to perform centralized management reporting of all permissions. So you have to go in and do it at a granular level. You can do some things at the site level, most things at a site level, and some things at a site collection, but very few things you can do across your entire farm, much less multiple farms. So gathering the data that you need is time-consuming, and so it makes real-time reporting very difficult, if not impossible, out of the box. But 2010 has been improved slightly, but for most folks, this is one of the things that my company does, and there's a number of solutions that are out there, but is permissions reporting, because it is lacking and it is only at a granular level and even limited there. But just to give you an idea of what it looks like, what's available, so in 2007, it's not easy to generate. You've got to go in and compile site data at the local level, so site by site, and pull that data down. And then go and look and find data collected from the object model itself. So you're going to have to get the data that you need right out of the box, limited, but you can go and script and pull the data that you need out of the object model. So for a lot of administrators that are not that deep into the inner workings of SharePoint, this is going to be a difficult request. And even once you collect that raw data, then you need to aggregate that, save it locally, to make the reporting meaningful. So you're going to have to do a lot of massaging of that data to be able to get what you need, and then repeat that on a regular basis. Go in there and massage that data. In a prior team, I had an analyst that did all of the analytics out of the SharePoint environments for the organization. And here was an individual that was dedicated to the reporting systems, and SharePoint was the primary tool that we used. But he spent almost every day doing nothing but pulling data, massaging that data, so that we had these daily reports that appeared to be fairly real-time, but the reality was there was just a lot of manual effort to get the data there. And permissions reporting in 2010, it's not improved a whole lot, but there are some new features around permissions management. The main change in 2010 has been PowerShell. So you have almost around 600 PowerShell commandlets that are available that allow you to go in and dig into the environment and get that deep data that you need. Again, you need to build some expertise with PowerShell to be able to do that. But there is a new feature, again, it's at that site level, but called check permissions. So you can, as an administrator, go in and verify the permissions of a user to a targeted site. But it's still done by a per-site list or item level, so you still need to go in and capture that data. Even if you're using PowerShell, pull that data together from several different sources, dig within the environment, massage that data, and then present that back in a managed way. So you can go in and create custom reports using the SharePoint object model, but again, you need to have that advanced model, that advanced understanding and training. and so it's just not something that is done through the UI and is out of the box, so a little more advanced. But you can get most of that data. Around usage and activity reporting, so think of this as you've got the electricity meter on the site of your house. It's a key tracking mechanism for capacity planning, as I talked about before. So understanding what's actually happening within your environment. And I always like to, when I present live, share kind of an experience with a peer director while at Microsoft that literally came into my office, pounded his fist on the desk, asking for development to customizations to SharePoint sites from my team, just demanding because it was highest priorities. And so I was able to go in and very quickly pull some usage logs, from the logs, activity logs, some usage data, and go back and show him that his site had barely been touched in the last 6 months, that this site, which was supposedly so business critical to his group, had hardly been used. And after just some data and some gentle pushback, he acknowledged that he was interested in having it there and for future use, but it was not yet system critical. So I was able to convince him that it was a much lower priority than other priorities on our development list. So the activity reports are a great resource for monitoring, measuring user adoption, ensuring that the business is getting the most out of their investment. So what's actually happening, and it's great to go back to teams with data and to show them and have a more intelligent conversation around requests and requirements that they may be pushing on your organization. In 2007, of course, you have these reports on usage and activity. They could only be generated by the site collection admin and site admins. And some of the things that you could do, like requests per day over the past 30 days, the average request per day by month for the past 12 months, the list of top pages over the past 30 days, the unique users graph over the past 30 days, and then you see the example of one of the reports over on the right side. So there's quite a lot that's available out of the box with 2007, but as with all of the reporting out of SharePoint, you need to dig to find the data that you need. You need to aggregate that, sort through it, store it in a way that allows you to show kind of the trending data. So over time, and this is just one of those things about statistics and reporting in general, is that the slice of data at any given time is less valuable than showing what's happening over time. So by showing that trending data, seeing where things are moving, it's going to give you a much better indicator of what's happening inside the platform than a single day or even a single week of activity. So just be aware that, again, most of the reports are available only at the site level and not in that aggregated view that's more valuable. And because most organizations require those long-term reports, you're going to be capturing this data, storing it, and, again, doing a lot of massaging of that data to get it to show that, over time, what's happening. In 2010, it's still generated by the same level of permissions, but you do have some better out-of-the-box usage reporting. You still have the graphic aspects that you, again, are able to click into the report and actually do something here. But you still need to dig in and find the data that you need and aggregate that over time to show the trending information. And the importance of this, of course, is giving that global visibility into how SharePoint is used. And it's valuable for two reasons that I've made the points. But you need to provide the business and your management team with reports and data that show them how it's being used. And it allows them, by having that accurate picture of what's happening, to make an educated decisions around design, architecture, and taxonomy choices. So that's why it's important to have activity and usage reporting. Storage reporting, I know this is a concern with a lot of organizations that are moving their content across from other enterprise content management platforms. They're consolidating, they're moving things out of file shares. and consolidating even from multiple versions of SharePoint. And so as they're moving this massive amounts of data and content into SharePoint, they're concerned about what's happening with storage, certainly with their architecture, for their content database sizes. And so by analyzing storage, it's extremely important for capacity planning and knowing, where do we need to grow, and are we now, impacting, or are we going to be impacting performance or even the organization of content so that it's accessed in the most optimal way. So the best practice of monitoring, setting limits to the size of SharePoint sites, it's an important part of the overall governance policies. So your governance planning, saying how are we going to manage this? What are the limitations? What are Microsoft's guidelines on the storage limitations? And then from a performance basis, what we've seen within our own environment, what are our best practices? So the next step is to track usage and ensure that end users have the storage they require to meet their business needs. And some of those policies, it might be that end users that have a valid reason for adding a lot of content. If you're not monitoring what's happening in those environments, you may be setting policies standardized across the organization that are not meeting the needs of most of your end users. Storage reporting in 2007, so you can report on document libraries including size, number of items, last modified date and path, documents including type, size, last modified and path, and then lists including type, name, size, items, last modified and path. So you've got an example of what those reports look like there, and that storage space allocation with right up top, it's letting you monitor how close you're coming to the limitations that you've set beforehand. In 2007, it provides you with some of the essentials you need, but again, most administrators, they need to augment that, so out of the box it's not providing everything that they need, and so they need to go back into SQL Server directly to perform analysis and reporting. Some of the other things that you might consider is going into Central Admin and looking at by site collection or assigned by site quota, but also looking at the trending data and storage and content database analysis. Again, you may need to aggregate that data and store it and look at trending data, manually tracking that to get the best and most clear data out of the system. In 2010, it's been changed slightly. Reports on storage can be generated by site collection admins across multiple sites, but not at the individual site level. So the report shows storage usage by site and a trend on growth based on time frame, but there's actually that less detail. It's not as granular. They tried to simplify that, provide that broader view in 2010, but at the same time they got rid of some of the granular data. And so there's a quick little snapshot of the type of data that it provides. So some of the things that you might consider extending the visibility is to start looking at the long-term trends in storage and content database usage, going in and looking down to the item level at how content is being used. Again, a lot of manual effort needed, a lot of scripting and massaging of data to get the data that you need. For your audit reporting, again, there's auditing capability that's available right outside of SharePoint. It's become essential for the focus of many governance strategies to go in and set up their audit procedures. Again, it may be depending on your industry, the level of compliance, the different rules that you're being held to, over how you set up your audit rules, what you need to monitor, what data is relevant in your reporting. But it all should be part of that governance strategy, that governance discussion up front, to say that what are the rules that we're being governed by, that we're being held to, what are those hard and fast rules versus what are the best practices, and then what is possible out of the box with the reporting, with the auditing reporting, and where do we need to augment. So IT may require additional data as part of capacity planning, Legal may oversee internal or external audits. So you find out who owns it, what the rules that they're guided by, and make sure that their expectations are being met. So as you're growing and as SharePoint is expanding, how you're performing the audits, how frequently, the type of data that's being captured or reported on may change. So you need to constantly review, make sure that you are within compliance so that it doesn't come back and bite you later that your rules had quickly become outdated. I know a lot of, depending on the industry, almost on a quarterly basis, you need to go in and review the analytics to make sure that you're capturing the right information. So in 2007, SharePoint basically records audit data when auditing is enabled at a site collection. So site collection admins can then view the audit records. So again, only those things which are recorded. It's limited in what can be recorded. And event details includes user IDs associated with the event, the site of the event, the item type, the event date and time, the event description, and the item name and URL. So it's fairly limited, but again, this is essential data that you can build around. Again, you can augment through scripting, through PowerShell, and through third-party tools to get even more robust data. In 2010, there's no changes to how the auditing reporting is done, and the site collection admins still maintain ownership of the audit records. So fairly straightforward what can be done with auditing. Performance reporting is something that has been improved with 2010, but most performance reporting comes from outside of the platform, either through should be custom scripts and reporting against the farm, or third-party monitoring and performance tools, and there's a number of tools that are out there. I've got a couple of examples. But most performance reporting is owned by operations, not necessarily the admin. So operations, the infrastructure folks, depending on whether they're internal or external, are going to want to pull this data and monitor it more closely. However, the performance reporting does fit in with the overall auditing and the rest of the governance-related reporting that's done for the organization. And again, at the end of the day, it comes down to whether your end users are happy with the system, if their needs are being met, if the system is slow, if the system is sluggish when entering certain web apps or site collections or accessing content that could be related to content databases, all things that you need to be able to look at and see it to a granular level to see how the system is responding to be able to meet those end user needs. So in 2007, not a whole lot that's there for performance monitoring. It's a little more robust in 2010. Central Admin has a number of tools. There are third-party tools that are related as well. So I'm going to show you a list of some of the things that are available in the kit. So the SharePoint Diagnostic Studio. So it's something that's available for free download. I believe the version 3 is the latest one that's out there. So it allows you to go and see a number of performance indicators, but is viewed as outside of the normal SharePoint deployment. So you do need to go and download those separately, and I've got a link to it there in TechNet, so you get to all the data there. But what's available? So there's quite a bit. These are just the pre-configured reports. Of course, you can go in and modify these and create your own reports. You can see that it gets down to a very granular level around performance. This is why it is so critical to understand what are the performance indicators that are driving, that are important to your business and driving your reporting. Figure out what you need first and then how to go and meet those needs, whether from out of the box, through the Diagnostic Studio, or through third-party tools. Also available, I've got a couple screenshots here. The one on the right is from a company called SharePoint, and then the one on the left is from Web Trends, which is the partner of choice for Microsoft and SharePoint for overall web analytics. And they do it in a very, very pretty way. They do their controls there. But what they provide is a much more granular, down to the item level reporting that helps you with performance, that show all different aspects of what's happening inside your environment, so that you can make the most of the data that's being generated out of the box, and to capture and show trending information for that data. So again, definitely want to take a look at some of the vendors that are out there and what they provide and what's going to best help your organization meet its needs and do its governance planning. So just a summary, out of the box, SharePoint provides you with those basics. It might be sufficient for your organization. For most, they need something a little bit deeper, a little bit more robust, especially when it comes to trending data. So just think about that and have a discussion with a reporting analyst within your organization to go and understand what's out of the box. Again, first ask those questions of what is the right data that we need to best manage and govern the platform, and then two, how do we get the data? So getting the data you need requires you to be a little bit creative, to either build something yourself or to do a lot of data massaging, or to start talking to some third-party firms that are able to capture a lot of this data and out of the box on their platforms provide the reporting that you need. So from a planning perspective, and this is just the broader advice for governance planning, utilize your established project management methodology. Every organization has one that's out there. Most of those methodologies have questions that they ask, that they have you standards that they have you meet that will help you figure out, plan out your reporting strategy. But at the core, understand your business objectives first. What are you trying to achieve with SharePoint? That will help you define what then your reporting needs are. Understand your end user expectations for the platform. Understand the governance models. Your corporate governance does not equal SharePoint governance. Your corporate governance is the broader view of how we're going to, what we need to do to meet our business objectives, and then you create your governance policies, which then SharePoint meets. SharePoint goes and you develop reporting and your risk assessment and how you deploy it, how you provision it, how you monitor and administrate the platform, all need to fit within that governance model that's defined at that higher level. As part of that, you have a healthy change management platform. So take feedback and constantly be iterating, learning from your plan, and making changes that are necessary to keep things moving forward. So, and then make those efforts, those priorities, as requests come in for new features, for better data and reporting, that you are making the priority of those requests transparent. So when people can see that they've been heard, that their request may be number 20 down the list with no resources assigned today, but they see that it was considered, that it was prioritized, and hopefully we'll be able to see from that list why their request is either at the top of the list or down near the bottom, based on the prioritization against all of the items that are being tracked within the request process. So change management is critical to a healthy SharePoint platform, and giving people visibility into what's happening. So some quick best practices here. Identify a governance champion, and around reporting is part of that. If you have a reporting analyst, somebody who can own that role and be responsible for understanding what SharePoint can do out of the box and where those gaps are between what it can do and what the business needs, it's always good to have somebody that has some experience to focus on that specifically. And clarify those roles and responsibilities, make sure people know what they're signing up for. As I mentioned, change management, document that governance and change management process. When people understand how they play within that process, they're more likely to participate. If they've got visibility, they're going to more likely participate. If they feel that they've been heard, they're more likely to bring other requests and issues to the surface, otherwise they may sit on because they're discouraged by not having visibility in the process. Always clarify and document your information architecture. Understand where these requests, especially around reporting, at what level they impact. Talk about where you're blind within your reporting architecture. So maybe you're starting with out of the box. Just make it clear where those limitations are, so as the business comes back and wants more data, you can make it very clear, look, our hands are tied. Unless we go and build something and spend the time and development dollars to customize or buy a third-party product, here's where we're blind. As part of change management, again, make a list of current risks, make it visible. The risks might be that you're running blind on several different areas because out-of-the-box reporting is limited. But provide that list of current and future projects and business activities to let people know that, hey, this is what we would do if we had the budget, if we had the resources, if we had the time, and what the business value of those things, if you were able to do, what they would bring to the business. So in summary, make decisions about your platform based on data, not just what are quote-unquote best practices. So that's what reporting is there for, so that you can make sound decisions about your SharePoint platform. Have a plan for tracking and measuring the KPIs and analytics, and make people accountable. So by make the data visible and transparent, clarify the potential impacts of that data, and then constantly review what's happening with that data. If you have any other questions about the SharePoint reporting, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me at cbuck@exceller.com, and of course, I'm always on Twitter at BuckleyPlanet. I will be writing on the SharePoint reporting in 2013 and Office 365 in the coming months. So be looking for additional content there. And otherwise, hopefully we'll see you in Copenhagen in February, where I'll be keynoting with Dan Holm on governance. And I will see you in February.